Today I'll be giving a brief introduction to the OLED screen. The OLED screen is extremely useful in almost any project. Since this is basically just a miniature screen, you can do many things you would expect to be able to do. For example, include text, or images, or even mini clips. Today we will go into detail about displaying text on the screen. For more information, please visit the GitHub page attached to the library. The OLED screen plugs into the TWI port. The OLED screen is capable of using multiple libraries, but the one we have found to be the most reliable and have the most capabilities is a library called U8G2. This library contains an extensive amount of commands, so I will just be introducing you to some of the basic ones and how to use them. The screen requires you to include a constructor line. It is a bit complicated and varies depending on the buffer method you want to use. I will include them later. Now to initialize the screen, you just need to include u8g2.begin in void setup. This will tell your Arduino that you'll be using an attached screen. You do not need to tell it about any port since there's only one port that the screen can be plugged into. Some basic commands you're going to want to know are u8g2.drawString, which accepts an x coordinate, a y coordinate, and then a string. It will write the string to the coordinates you put in, but does not accept any variables as inputs. u8g2.setCursor accepts an x coordinate and a y coordinate, then places an invisible cursor where you specify. u8g2.print accepts strings as well as variables. You often use this with the setCursor command to print variables. u8g2.setFont accepts a font value. An extensive list of fonts can be found here. It is not as easy as placing these commands in the code and having words show up on the screen. While this seems like it just complicates things, it allows you to do more in the long run. There are 3 different drawing methods supported by U8G2. There are pros and cons to each one, which I will put on the screen when I begin talking about them. The first mode is full screen buffer mode. This method requires this constructor. This method is based around the commands u8g2.clearBuffer and u8g2.sendBuffer. The way it works is that you'll first use the clearBuffer command, then use the commands you wish to write to the screen, then use the sendBuffer command to actually put the words on the screen. The second mode is page buffer mode. This method requires this constructor. There's only one difference between these, it is that the F was replaced with a 1. This method is based on a do-while loop. It is formatted as seen here. You will start the format by having the command u8g2.firstPage, then start a do-while loop. Inside the loop, you will put any commands you wish to use to write to the screen. Then close the do-while loop while writing while u8g2.nextPage. The final mode is u8x8 character mode. This method requires this constructor. This method is definitely the simplest method to use, but due to the simplicity of it, it is limited just to characters, meaning you cannot display special graphics. There are no special commands required for this method. You can just use the commands that I spoke about earlier in the video, but replace u8g2 with u8x8 instead. Please note that the fonts you use are different for this method. Make sure any fonts you use are the u8x8 fonts. Like I said earlier, there are a lot of things going on with this library, so I highly recommend looking into the GitHub page if you have any questions. This concludes our overview of the OLED screen.